Today is October 10, 2020, and the Tucson Astrologers Guild is proud to present Roy Gillett on speaking on the astrology of world economy before, during, and after COVID-19. I don't know why I'm not seeing Roy in my screen. I'm seeing Frank chewing on something.
Yeah, on my screen, I'm sitting next to you, Gail.
Oh, yes, there you are. There you are. Okay, so Roy Gillett speaking on the astrology of world economy before, during, and after COVID-19. In case you aren't all familiar with Roy, he's the president of the United Kingdom's The Astrological Association, full-time consultant astrologer since 1976, software advisor since 1988, especially for solar fire, astro finance researcher, international conference organizer and speaker. He's a busy man. He keeps his fingers in all these pies, and I'm sure we can count on him to really present an excellent talk today, and we've been looking forward to it so much. Let's put our hands together so he can see us, welcoming Roy to the Zoom. Take it away, Roy.
I'm going to share my screen pretty well straight away, I think, because you've seen what I look like in the little picture, but here's a picture of Portugal West Coast just before sunset a couple of years ago to get us started, but then we get straight into my PowerPoint presentation. So this is the astrology of the world economy from before, during, and after COVID-19, but we're going to stretch pretty wide. And I'd like to, before I do that, thank you for inviting me to give this talk. It's always a joy to have a chance to share astrology with the world, because I think if the world would only have astrology shared with it more often, many of the problems we face would be much easier and wiser to handle. And this, nothing could be more true now than what we're going through at the moment. So thank you very much for inviting me, and I hope we'll have a very fruitful time together. I'm going to present a lot of material. Gail will be looking at the chat box, so if you have burning questions, if there's something that's really burning, it might get picked up straight away. I will pause occasionally to see if there's anything, but we've got a lot of material to get through, so there will be time for general discussion at the end, I'm sure. So that's the title. There are four main approaches. I'm going to use long, medium, and short-term astro cycles to put today's dramatic changes in perspective, and then trace how the current Mars and imminent Mercury retrogrades will unfold. And I've got some very interesting original work on those, and then relate this to Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius, and ask to what extent will the present world economy survive or change? Now, this is a radical question. Just about every discussion about how we're going to handle the COVID-19 situation assumes that somehow we have to prop up the system until it's over and we got a vaccine, and then we can bounce back to where we were before, or somehow get our way, climb back to where we were before. And my feeling is, looking at the astrology, and maybe you'll agree with me, although this might seem very radical, that it's not going to be the same afterwards, that it's going to be different. And we've got to start looking positively at how it can be different. And this is a bit radical, but we'll see what you think by the time we come to the end, because I don't think it has to be for the worse, it could be for the better. So to put all this in perspective, for about 5 years now, since I looked at, it might be longer, since I first looked at the fact that Jupiter, Saturn and Pluto were going to be in Capricorn together, and asked the question, how often has that happened in the past? Because that's what we do as astrologers, isn't it? If we see something special happening, we see how often does it happen. Sometimes we think something's very special when it isn't. It happens very often, like a new moon, for example. That's obvious. But what about this one? Jupiter, Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn, and solar fire enables you to look through from, well, 4999 BCE, that's 5,000 years before the birth of Christ, to 4999 CE, for 4,999 years afterwards. So how often did it occur that these planets were together in Capricorn? Now, it happened quite often in those early millennia BCE, but you see that there was a 2,443 year gap between 1894 BCE and 549 CE, and then another 600 year gap, and then another 800 year gap, or 500 and bit year gap, until the one we're going through at the moment. So this is very rare, these planets come together. And if we have more time, we particularly look at the ones since in this post-Christian era, or this Christian era rather, and see that these are special moments. Like 1284 was when the ducat was first launched in Venice as a system of currency, and the ducat lasted as a very valuable system of currency right through into the 19th, early 20th century, when maybe the dollar took over. So these are quite key moments in history, and we're going through a bigger one now than has ever happened before. And if you look at it even from the sidereal point of view, the gap is even more. It's from 3065 BCE to 549, and then another one coming in, but it's still quite a long gap. Okay, but there's another point to consider. What about if tropical Uranus was in Taurus? So we've got the 3 Capricorn planets, and tropical Uranus is in Taurus. And look at this now. The last time this happened was 3838 BCE. It hasn't happened again until now. Now, if you go back to 3200 BCE, it's the beginning of the Bronze Age, the late Neolithic Stone Age. It's a really, I'm just getting something out of my screen. That's right, good. And when writing was first started, and when the idea of metal, forging metal rather than stone, was first developed. And if you think of the kind of development in the world in the last 5,000 plus years as a result of the development of these two things, writing and metal, and the ability to manipulate and structure metal and fight with metal and do all sorts of things with metal, it's changed the whole nature and fabric of the way society can organize itself. So we're at the moment going through, symbolically, I would argue, as big a change. And in our lifetime, we're probably not going to completely understand it, but we stand at the threshold of enormous change. And it's important to see it this way, because we argue about what we had yesterday, not realizing we are changing something that is really long. Now, I don't know if any of you have seen graphic ephemerises or use graphic ephemerises. There's many ways of using them. It's another facility from Solar Fire. And what I've done here is put up a graph of the movement of the planets, outer planets that is, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, through the 15th century. And you can see on the left-hand side, degrees from 0 to 36. Those who've never done this before, you can see that the first 30 degrees obviously is Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, right the way down to Pisces. And these little black dots are when the planet changes sign. Now, again, we could spend the whole talk looking through this and symbolizing it to certain points in history. But what I want to show you here, this is the 14th century. And this period I put in a green rectangle, particularly 1444-ish, the mid-1440s, when you had Uranus moving across the Jupiter-Saturn position, and then Jupiter-Saturn moving on soon after to cross Pluto, and then Neptune not a lot later. This was when writing, the first printing, was developed. And at the beginning of this century, there were a few hundred books in written script books, monastic books, in the Cambridge University. Because of printing, by the end of the century, and you can see this big dramatic revolutionary spur of the Renaissance and the beginning of a determination of people to start reading in the vernacular, rather than just the book Bible being about Latin and the control being centralized. This incredible upheaval comes at the end of the century as thousands of books become printed, and some of them translations of the Bible. Now, compare that, you see what I've done? I've now got the 20th century. And if we look at the 1940s and the 20th century, this conjunction moves up a bit. It moves up to Taurus Gemini. And it's this Gemini energy, which is the beginning of computer technology, the beginning of radar. So many things that were discovered as because of the war, all started happening out of this time. And as a result of this development of electronic technology, we get the development of computer technology and the internet technology, where you see all this concentration of energy in the 1980s and 1990s. So we can see that the 20th century and the 15th century have a mirror effect of a structural development in the way that society, the tools that society has. Now we move forward to the 16th century, and I'm just going to focus on that point of the 16th century. Here we have the conjunction pretty close down here near the cusp of Pisces, with Neptune being connected with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And of course, this was the time of the Reformation. The people know now, we keep on talking about it, that when Pluto moved into Capricorn, is when Luther nailed his thesis to the wall of the church. And this led to a major revolution in spiritual relationships and religious wars that still are settling in some parts of the world between various Christian groups to this day. If we then jump to now, you can see how it's now not so much hitting Pisces, but hitting Aquarius. And we're going to talk a lot more about that later on. So this is a change of science and technology emanating out of the electronics of the previous generation. So this is my next stage of putting in context the time we're going through at the moment. Let's now put this into ordinary language rather than diagrams. Just a summary of the main developments of the 16th century. The Reformation of the churches, the dissolution of the monasteries in England, the first circumnavigation of the world, developing trade to the Far East, the expansion of Islam into Eastern Europe and further east into India. Copernicus, on the day he died, or just after his death, was published on Revolution of Heavenly Bodies, which started the remembering of the heliocentric nature of the universe. Never let anybody tell you that the old astrologers didn't know that the Earth went round the sun. They did. It got lost somehow and was rediscovered in the Renaissance. And then this is when Pluto was in Capricorn at the beginning of the 16th century, and I've included the sidereal part as well as the tropical zodiac. Now, the next time Pluto was in Capricorn, 1762 to 92, again using sidereal and tropical zodiacs, there was rapid expansion of colonialism and industrialization, leading to radical upheaval in the way of the world and societies within nations and how they did business with each other. The European nations, led by Britain, mapped and recorded the world. I mean, Captain Cook recorded the east coast of North America, as well as going to Australia and New Zealand and many Pacific islands. And they were sort of as if they were creating an 18th, 19th century doomsday book of assets. Out of all of this, today's capitalism and the struggle for democracy were born. So these are two stages, moving away from the rigid attachment to one view of Christianity, or actually two views if you take the struggle between the East and Western churches. And again, the second stage, which is the liberation of people from the absolute monarchy, the control of a particular central authority system. And now we're going through a third phase, which is the liberation of individual control over his own destiny and the attempts of the state to control it. So that's the lessons from the more long to medium term history. But now let's look at more recent political history. And I'm just cherry picking one little detail. One can spend a wonderful time looking through the 19th and 20th centuries and seeing how astrology, particularly the 20th century, related to the events that happened. But this one I think is particularly interesting, which is the build-up through the 1920s to 30s, if we consider the three outer planets. Pluto in Capricorn, in Cancer, from 1912 to 1939, particularly in the 1930s. The regeneration of national and family values, the breakup of the church, the family authority system, and the actual imperial way that the world was controlled. Neptune in Virgo, between 29 and 43. The purity, the obsession with purity that you see in the social political life of the 1930s expresses itself, of course, in Hitler's fascism. It expresses itself in the attitude of the Japanese towards the purity of their own race, and Italy, and also the communist thing, another kind of puritanical approach towards society and the way you organized it. And then this is the belief, of course. Neptune is belief, Pluto is restructuring, Uranus is upheaval. And there was global destruction through conflict based on excessive self-belief. The idea of the master race, or the idea of the specialness of the Japanese nation, or the idea of communism being special. And the attempt by other races to stem the pressure of this fanatical fascist approach. Well, now we come to the last decade, the 2010s and the 2020s, and well, maybe the last two, but certainly the one we are coming up to this year, the last 10 years. And I mean, maybe you've been building before that, but Pluto again is here. We have the regeneration of authority and systems. If you look back to where things were at in the 1990s and early 20th, 21st century, you can see that, and particularly where we came to at the time of the economic crash in 2008, you see Pluto moved into Capricorn, the opposite sign. So it wasn't a transformation of national values and family values. It's a transformation of authority and the structures by which we control ourselves. And the belief is not, it's a Piscean belief. So it's not a belief in purity. It's a belief in victimization and sacrifice. Now I'm thinking very deeply about this recently. Pisces is a bit like the story of Cinderella, isn't it? You get this beautiful girl abused by ugly people who is really got so much to offer the world, and yet she's given all the bad jobs to do. And suddenly, of course, the ideal end of it is this transformation. But the idea that we are victims and we have to sacrifice ourselves is the kind of notion, if you like, that undermines a lot of political and social arguments at the moment. It leads to division in various countries. It leads to resentment between countries. It leads to rejection of groups. It leads to fear of people coming to take from us what we've got. This is Neptune in Pisces. The negative side, of course, the positive side is some people who are willing to sacrifice everything and ask for nothing in return. There is something very beautiful and wonderful in Pisces, but there is also something very dangerous. And of course, with Uranus in Taurus again, we get global destruction through self-indulgent greed. The idea that I am a victim and somebody must look after me, which is very much the ugly stepsister, isn't it? Like, oh, Cinderella, look after my dress. I want to make sure this shoe fits me. I want more and more and more. I've got a lot, but I want more. That is the, if you like, the Piscean belief gone wrong, and the global destruction that comes from it is what happens. So I have this rather provocative suggestion that in many ways, if the 1930s and 20s into the 30s was fascism emanating from a master race philosophy, what we have today is fascism emanating from a me first philosophy. When we stop allowing the niceness of our Piscean sensitivity and let the victim obsession of our Piscean, we all become like the ugly sisters. I hope that's not too provocative, but it's another factor that lies behind the economics of what we're going through. So now I want to zoom in with this sort of, having done this little social introduction to recent economic history. And I say recent because I'm jumping back now to the end of the 17th century. Britain had lost its navy in a war against Holland, would you believe it, and was trying to regenerate it. And they launched a public offer so people could lend money on interest to rebuild the navy. And this was a particularly successful launch, and it worked incredibly well. Britain did rule and managed to establish their navy, and it ended up with Britain virtually ruling the waves of the world for more than a century, or several centuries really. And it also started a fascination with investment. Now, I mean, obviously, through thousands of years, people have put money and resources up for projects. But the whole idea of capitalism, as we know it today, where you invest in order to get some sort of reward, to enable others to do something with your money, they give you some of that money back, they do what they want to do, everybody is happy. That is the ideal way of capitalism. But then comes the idea of speculating in the money itself, so that you might start a project to do something ideal, but then you start playing around with the value of that project and the money, and changing money and finding all sorts of techniques to swindle around with the money. And if you look at this chart, you can see, I mean, if economics is about Earth, then let's see how much Earth and good, rigorous order is in this chart. Well, first of all, I've done it for midday. This may not, I mean, it was all day the shares are being sold, so it's not just midday, but it does emphasize the Leo, Jupiter, Sun, Pluto very strongly. And also the fact that Mars is in Virgo in opposed to Neptune, which is about, in a way, not a very clear. It's a rather risky or uncertain impatience. I've got to do it, you know, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do it. Also, you'll notice another mutable factor, Saturn, is opposed to Uranus, Venus in Gemini. There's also a nodal across the Cancer, but it's the Gemini Sagittarius I wanted to emphasize. And of course, the Mercury in Leo as well. So this is a speculative, far-reaching sort of investment opportunity, which might have worked out all right in that, but it started a whole process of doing business this way. And I was very amused when in April, well, it's not really, April's not a time to be amused, but it was fascinating to notice that in April, when the stock market and the reactions to COVID-19 was so extreme, and the unemployment built enormously throughout the world, and debt crisis increased, and people were saying this is the worst economic crisis for the last 300 years. Now, if you want to go to the web, you can look up what happened in Britain in 1720, which was exactly 300 years ago. It's called the South Sea Bubble Crisis. It's rather different. It's got a curiously modern sense to it, because it was about speculation and stocks and shares going up enormously and then crashing. But it was a crisis that brought down the government and put the Chancellor of the Exchequer in prison. And if you want to find out more about it, there's a link down there, or you can just look in Wikipedia if you want to go really into detail. Just type South Sea Bubble Crisis and 1720. But it's an indication of what goes wrong when all you're doing is playing around with money and not playing around with things that actually give real immediate benefit out of their operation. And this is one of the dichotomies we're going to see as we go on through this. Now, then look at this American Federal Reserve. I mean, this one I don't think I've highlighted. No, I haven't, but I'm going to point out a few things here. The sun is in Capricorn. This was actually made, the Fed Reserve was made to stabilize the economy because of a number of crises like the South Sea Bubble that had happened through the 19th century and early 20th century. In fact, if you look at the chart, it starts off with the sun in Capricorn, which seems to make good sense, but it's opposed to Pluto. Saturn is in Gemini, opposed exactly to Mercury. Mars is on the ascendant, opposed to Jupiter. Neptune is rising after that, and it's not quite opposed to Uranus, but it is sort of changed by sign, not far out of it. So you've got this situation of misinformation or a sort of weird information, Saturn opposed to Mercury, traumatic creativity, and excessive optimism. Pluto in the 12th house, tremendous fear. You know, the idea of the stock market is it's based on fear and greed. So you're frightened that you're not going to make money, and yet you want to make more. So when the market is going up and up and up, and you see your profits rising and rising and rising, the wise man knows how to get out, and most people don't. And it ends up dropping, and they lose what they thought they were going to make. And the people who buy into the market lose the most, because they buy at the most extreme top position before it falls. Now, this is the chart of a casino. And I'm wondering, I'm asking the question, how can gambling with people's work and livelihood be a sound basis for the world economy? And because of this, whenever you get Earth stelliums, you tend to get economic realizing. Gail, did you want to ask something? No, sorry, I thought I heard a voice in the distance. Okay, I'll carry on. As long as greed and money motivate our lives, they will point to major market downturns. And with COVID-19, the only way to sustain market price levels is by constantly putting in debt-based credit, such as tax cutting or quantitative easing. So you keep on putting more money into the system so the market stays up in value. But what is the real value? What is that being produced? The people who make more money by the market price going up, what have they actually given to you as a person living your life? What food have they given you? You know, this is a question to be asked. I'm not trying to make a political argument here. I'm just saying that if you do this, you can see that this is a chart that, again, I've been showing quite frequently of what astrological factors there are when the market comes to a top, when it turns. And because I feel that the earth energy, Taurus, the energy of good creative energy, business, of nurturing the earth so it brings its fruit so you can eat, the beauty of something like flowers, the steady, practical, hard sense of a good business person, Taurus. Virgo, the conscientiousness to detail, exactness, wanting to get things exactly right, wanting to do your duty, the realistic, hard, skeletal structure of everything you do is Capricorn. These are the earth energies which make the fabric of the earth and the business of the earth and the wealth of the earth reliable. So when these planets are strong, you expect there to be success. But because we live in a casino economy, when these planets are strong, they tend to push us back on reality. And this shows the history of this. So let's have a look. You see, I hope you can see this all right on your screens. The brown planets are all Earth planets. The obviously the other colors, the air is blue, red is fire, and there is a kind of darker blue, which is water. But you can see the dominance of Capricorn energy. This was at the end of 1929, the year of the Wall Street crash. I mean, some of those are obvious. They're always like that year, but not necessarily Mars in Capricorn, certainly not Saturn in Capricorn, and certainly not Neptune in Virgo. So this concentration of Earth energy, and you can see how the market fell in towards in October 29, but it carried on falling well after this, well down to a much lower bottom in the 1930s. So that's that period. And then again, in 1939, there's a reversal again with a strong concentration of Earth energy. And then again, you see the 1929 to 45 crash and depression, warning sign that I've shown you there. And then the period in the post-war, 1945 to 66, the post-war recovery, based on redirecting the military machine to consumer goods, led to a lovely boom in the market, but then a confrontation reality is not quite so strong. But if we just take that back a minute, you can see that you've got Pluto in Capricorn, and Pluto in Virgo, and Uranus in Virgo. And that was, of course, a very significant time for, as we know, the 1960s, a big turning point. And then from then until right the way through the 70s, we get this sideways movement. And then when Pluto and Jupiter went into Sagittarius, a big boom happened in the early 1980s, which sustained itself right the way. Now, this is the internet boom. This is the beginning of the internet, the incredible feeling that the whole world had changed, that the old rules didn't apply anymore. And it came to a desperate crash with this concentration of planets in Taurus, square to Uranus and Neptune in Aquarius in the year 2000. And it's called the dot-com crash. And for a long while, it was difficult to recover until the money was placed into a very long easing of credit as far as house buying was concerned, which led to an amazing boom in house prices, which led to a reinvestment in the stock market and a recovery in the stock market until the whole thing came to a crash in 2008 with the crash, the subprime mortgage crash. Again, notice the concentration. Pluto now just in Capricorn, Saturn in Virgo, Jupiter in Capricorn, and the inner planets in Earth signs too. So then you get that drop down, and then this recovery that we've been going through now. Now, I always used to show this from about 2014, 2015. And when I showed it, I gradually added on little bits of the market as I went along. But I never knew what was going to happen. This is red line is, look what's going to happen in 2020. And now we know what's going to happen in 2020 because it's happened. And it wasn't just that the intrinsic economic situation collapsed from within itself by over speculation, but rather the Earth reacted to us with this incredible virus, which has created an even worse economic crisis than any of the ones before, probably. Maybe even as bad as 29. It looks as if it might well be as bad as 29, the way things are going. Right. Look again at the Earth energy, as well as Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto in Earth. It is the most Earth orientated. It's urging us to restructure our economy. So I've just run ahead that those two bits I have actually just spoken, so I won't go through it again. So what is it that got us into this incredible expansion? I just wonder if I ought to show you this now. I think I am going to suddenly show you something that I just found today, and that's why it's not in order. But this is a diagram I found today when I was just thinking about talking to you. And this is a description of the US national debt, gross national debt, as a percentage of GDP, that's your annual income. From the beginning of World War I, you can see how incredible debt was created with the World War, and how that debt, that black line, was going down and down and down quite nice and steadily, right the way through to early 1980s. And if the same sort of approach had been taken, then I don't know if you remember the argument with Ross Perot, those who remember American politics in 1990, when the debt was up here, but Ross Perot says it was to be down here. But if it carried on like that, there'd be virtually no debt at all by 2010, when the 2008 crisis happened. In fact, what happened is a new policy was developed, a new approach to capitalism was developed, which is the idea to allow debt to increase in order to stimulate the economy. And this is the path it took through the 1990s into the year 2000, and then crashed a little bit into that, but then boomed up here and through Obama's time, and now what's going on at the moment. And this actually stopped in about 2018. So it's been going up with the coronavirus. It's probably up here where my little arrow is now. So I'm going to go back now to the astrology of all this. Where are we now? From current slide. Yeah. So in 1984, you'll notice that Jupiter conjuncted Neptune right at the very 1 minute of arc of Capricorn. Pluto had just gone into Scorpio, with Mars was close there, and Saturn was in Scorpio as well. So it's this incredible belief, Neptune, belief in money. They might say, oh, well, you're saying that Capricorn is a sensible thing, but, you know, it's very sensible and business-like. Yes, it is. But when you start believing money is the only answer, and particularly when you allow desire to come in and transformation of desire, this was the beginning of monetarism really getting underway. This idea of allowing debt to stimulate the economy, so and also selling of assets as well happened a lot in England. So that was the and it seemed to be very successful. I mean, it worked very well, and it worked so well, in fact, in America and Britain. Everybody seems to be getting much better off and enjoying life much better. It spread throughout the world. It in many ways encouraged the Chinese change to where the Chinese are today in the medium term. In 1990, 89, when the Berlin Wall was breached and the Soviet Union was defeated, it was seen that everything in the world was right. The capitalist system was right. The way it was being organized was right. It was the triumph of capitalism. The Soviet system had collapsed. Now, I've always argued that the Soviet system was state capitalism. It wasn't really a communism in a real sense. It was meant to be, but it never was. But that's beside the point. The important thing is we felt that capitalism had triumphed. And look at this. The Capricorn energy is now opposed to Cancer. This is the breakup of the imperial structure, if you like, or imperial, or the growth structure of the Soviet Union, and the new structure of capitalism now dominating the world for quite a while. So now we go on and we look at this from the Neptune-Jupiter conjunction, Jupiter return of December 2019. Now here we've got Capricorn building up again, but now it's not just as it was originally, Jupiter conjunct Neptune in Capricorn with Mercury. It's a much heavier situation. You've got Jupiter there coming in, but you've also had Saturn and Pluto wearing away at the Capricorn through the recent years, making it more and more difficult. And yes, all right, fair enough. Let's go back to earlier for a moment. It was back to incisive judgment because Pluto's in Capricorn now. All right, the previous Jupiter returns in 1996 and 2007, both came at a time when everybody thought everything in the garden was lovely, but it was about to go wrong. But now Pluto's coming in and it's a different story altogether. So we come a little bit later, just a month or so later, to the 12th of January 2020. And here we get the full throat of Capricorn. I don't know if you want to count the part of fortune, but you might as well in a way. If you do, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points in Capricorn and Uranus in Taurus. And this is the original 1984 chart. And you can see how, in a way, the time that we're going through at the moment, this is the 1989 chart. You can see again the Capricorn imposing itself on that. All right, there was Saturn was there. It's a Saturn return of the 1989 chart, but not with Pluto. And Pluto, if that had been the triumph of capitalism, it could have withstood the Pluto, but it couldn't. This would be my argument. And so I feel this is the nemesis of monetarist capitalism. I suggest that we're going to go through a major change in the whole way we think about the economics of the world. And we're going to need to work together with not just within our nations, but between our nations to get ourselves out of it, rather like in 2008, but on a much higher and more advanced level. So that is the medium term answer. And I just want to take stock a little bit of what, for me, this shows. And then the next thing is to look in much, much more detail about our present situation. We come to the present. I've talked about the past. What about the present? What is we say about the present? Now, the first thing I want to start saying is a quotation, a very famous quotation. I don't know who said it first, it's traditional, but it's a wise quotation. Money is a good servant, but a poor master. Now, to find security in the coming Aquarian time, and we're going to look at that in a moment, we need to rethink and how we see and treat each other, especially those unfamiliar. The Earth dominance of the Jupiter-Saturn phase through the past years, and you know probably that for the last 200 years, except for 1 year, 1981, every Jupiter-Saturn conjunction has been in an Earth sign. And from the end of this year, from the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction we're going to look at in a minute, it's going to be in air signs. And so there's a big change in that, because if you like, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, one of the most ancient cycles known to man. It's thousands of years astrologers have been looking at it. And it is how expansion and consolidation come together and work with and against each other to create a balanced world. And when this gets out of kilter, then we get to major crises. And it's been about Earth for the last 200 years, this massive expansion of colonialism and capitalism and industrialization. It's going to be about conceptual understanding and ideas. We'll talk a bit more about that in the Aquarian age. Now, so we devised the world economy based on the growth of things, and this has corrupted the way we do business with each other. There's been disputes over broken agreements, all about things, about haves and haves not. And it's set individuals, groups, societies, nations, and religions against each other. Now, the Pluto in Capricorn phase is now climaxing to show us the horrific consequences of such mindless incompetence. To change this, we have to refocus the priorities of the economic model that drives the way we live our lives. Then we will change the way we think and treat each other and the planet. The climax of Pluto in Capricorn period in 2020 is forcing us to realise, just in case we did not realise this earlier in the year, a long Mars retrograde period is here to reinforce the forcing. Now, this is where we come to where we are today. I don't know if any of you really studied this Mars vernal equinox this year. I know when I've looked at it for about a year ahead, I was really worried about it, because yeah, all right, every year my sun goes into Aries, and it's like the beginning of spring. It sparks, everything brightens up, seeds begin to burst in the ground. A new year is beginning to show some of its juice and beauty and freshness. But this vernal, and then it goes on, and I mean, Aries is about rushing off into new situations and having lots of new situations and feeling a bit freer and not so constrained as you are during the winter. But look at this vernal equinox. You had Mars exactly conjuncting Jupiter on the day of the vernal equinox, and about to conjunct Pluto and Saturn in the following week. And you had the Sun applying throughout that month to square all these positions, starting off by squaring the nodal axis. And, you know, this is when the COVID-19 became clearly obvious. We had warnings on the two other charts that I've shown you in a way. You know, the warning was beginning December, certainly clear in January as we get to the second chart I showed you, but now is when we're really feeling the effects in the Western world, in Europe, in America. And this was a very, very difficult time, and you know as much about it as I do, so I don't have to lay it on. And there we are. The important point is that now, between September and November, as we know, Mars is retrograding. It starts off at this point where my mouse is at the moment and slowly moves back to about 14 degrees. In the course of doing this, I heard you talking about this already, it's going to square the position it was, it transited through, but also it will square Saturn, which I think it did yesterday, was it? It's going to go back then and square Pluto. And it will finally go back and square Jupiter as well, I think. You know, you get the right order here because I'm looking at the vernal chart. But it will square it in our time today, but also square the position it was in, and also square its own position. So we haven't seen anything yet, really. We're just seeing the beginning of a very difficult period of Mars retrograde. So let's look at this in a bit more detail. Now here I'm going to show, oh no, yeah, we'll look at Mars retrogrades in history first, just one. This is the period of the Mars in Aries. Went in June, went into retrograde on the 9th of September, which was the day in Britain that we started beginning to restrict. And on the 14th of November, it goes direct. And then it doesn't enter Taurus until the 6th of January. So it's going to be in Aries from June to January, a whole 6 months. Now, there ain't been that many Mars in retrogrades in Aries. 1973, it went back from Taurus to Aries for a while, and in 1988, it moved back from Aries to Pisces. Both years were pretty difficult years. However, 2020 is more special than that because Mars stays in Aries for the whole retrograde period. The last time this occurred was in September to November 41. Now, think of what was happening then. Hitler was advancing into Russia. Japan was just about to attack Pearl Harbor. And there's the Pearl Harbor chart. And there's the period of when Mars was in Aries in 41 to 42. Almost exact replica of this year. Is the world going through a similar crisis for a very different reason? And if we look back more than 100 years for Mars retrograde only in Aries times, there have been just 3 times. They're all significant. 1983 was when Britain recognised the USA just after the Treaty of Paris, ended the war between Britain and the US. And 1962 in the middle of the US Civil War. And in 1999, and that was the year that suffragettes were first force-fed in a British prison. If you like, it's the nadir of the relationship that where the struggle for women for respect really became savage and deep. All very traumatic turning points in history. I don't know if you ever looked at anything like this before. This is the daily motion of Mars during its retrograde period. And you can do this with solar fire. You can ask it to do daily motion. And if you do it for each day, and I'm convinced, you see, people talk about, oh, Mercury's retrograde or Mercury's not retrograde, and I'm going to wait till Mercury goes direct. And, oh, I must do it today because it goes into retrograde tomorrow. Or I'll wait until tomorrow because it's going into direct tomorrow. And for me, it's not like that at all. The retrograde period is a time when the planet speeds up in apparent retrograde motion up to a certain point where it slows but still goes back but doesn't go back quite so fast, and then starts going back in a lesser amount in a much faster way, if you see what I mean, until it makes its direct station. And each point or each phase in this cycle is significant. Now, what I've done here is I've put in bold, these are the daily motions, see, moving 1 minute of arc a day steadily from when it went into retrograde. Then there's this retrograde station there, and it stayed pretty well the same spot for 3 days. Then one day, one minute, 1 minute, 1 minute more, 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 until we get to the 18th and 19th, where it's beginning to not go back quite so fast. It's only a little bit minorly slowing a bit. And then we get to about the 3rd of October, where it takes 1, 2, 3 days to, or no, 1, 2, 3, 4 days to move 1 minute of arc backwards. It's slowing in its backward movement. And look at this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days to do more. It's virtually still going back, but in a much more steady way. And so you go like that through here. We're now, or today, this is today, we're right in the middle of the slowest backward motion. And then it starts after that, around about here, 23rd, starts going backwards less. Now 14, see 13, 12, 11, 6, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, direct station here, direct station. So what is it? What is it? Why am I saying all this? Well, on the 18th of September, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. On the 26th of September, the SCOTUS announcement in the Rose Garden happened, and it's been at least one person who's an expert says that was a super spreader event. On the 30th of September was the first presidential debate. This is just for England, but for US, as most of my speeches are in US. I could do this. Those of you who live in England will know this fits very nicely with things that happen in England. On the 1st of October, the president had announced he had COVID-19. And on the 5th, he left hospital. So 1st, 5th leaves. And now you get this whole scenario going on, which is going to intensify over the next week about whether the president is well, whether he's mad, depends on which way you look at it, whether he's a hero, you know, this is just in America. In Britain, we had this increase in, and Europe generally, there's a big spurge up of coronaviruses. At the moment, Britain is far worse, Europe has got a bigger increase, 7-day average of increase in COVID-19 version than America has. America's about 40,000 a day, Europe about 80,000 a year. If you take the whole of Europe, Britain, it's about 12,000 a day. It's getting very serious. And this is all to do, I think, with the way that the Mars retrograde is intensifying its energy to make us, every time we try and do anything, something gets in the way. And we have to get through this because it's a real challenge to our patience, our kindness, our vision. Now, I think maybe, I'm not sure, that what I put up here is the repeat of the actual Mars retrograde and Mars in Aries phase that we just mentioned. But I've also put that into the Mercury retrograde or Mercury position and how that relates to the outer planets. Gail, is there anybody who wants to say anything yet, or shall I just carry on?
We have one person who's asked you about the cryptocurrencies.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yes, opinions on cryptocurrencies. He asked the question several slides back, but you know how this would figure in.
Yeah, I will come to. I don't think I want to stop for cryptocurrencies at the moment. It is an interesting conversation, but what I'm trying to get across is the impact of change that we're going through at the moment. And I think this is something we could do at the end. We could touch on at the end if that's all right. I know if it is the same person who was listening to me give another talk, and I've just got a book on this subject, but I haven't had a chance to read it thoroughly yet. But I will come to that, Gal. Okay, so it's quite nice to have that little pause moment, because now what we've got to realise is it's not just the Mars retrograde, because Mercury moved into Libra on the 5th of September, just before Mars went into retrograde. A couple of days later, Jupiter made a direct station. Mercury went into Scorpio on the 27th. Saturn's gone direct on the 29th. Then Mars squared Saturn on the 29th. That's a challenging day. Just no wonder that debate was so challenging on the 30th with those two events happening. Pluto moved into direct on the 4th of October. You can relate this to American politics and American political events quite easily. And of course, Mars has squared Pluto yesterday. But what we've got to look forward to now is Mercury moving into retrograde on the 14th of October. And about 5 days later, Mars squaring Jupiter. And then on the 28th of October, Mercury moves backwards into Libra momentarily. Then it goes direct and it moves forward back into Scorpio. So you've got this hovering of Mercury on the cusp of Scorpio, late Cancer. And then on the 12th of November, Jupiter conjuncts Pluto. Mars goes direct 2 days later, and then Neptune goes direct at the end of the month. Now, this period, right the way through to the American election and the immediate aftermath of it, is an incredibly fraught period. And it's not just fraught because of the relationship between various politicians, but because of the way that this is likely to affect, what we were saying when we saw the vernal equinox in March this year, and then the summer happened and everybody tried to bounce back their economies to normality, was that there was going to be a second phase as the Mars retrograde happened, because the Mars retrograde was coming back to the positions we were talking about earlier. And this is a description of all the intensifications of this second phase. There is no magic cure. It is going to get worse, it looks like. You can see all these energies are very much about a confrontation with a build-up of pressure that has been there, if you like, for several years, if not for a much longer period of time. So we have to get through this before we can look at what comes next. And, obviously we could sit here and I want you, when you're listening to this, start thinking yourself specifically about Mercury going into Libra, Mars retrograde, just think about how, and put them all together, what that might mean. Look at the world, what's happening in the world, and then look at the aspects out there. See how the aspects just undermine, give a commentary almost on the what's happening in the world. And this particular period of the Mars retrograde is particularly rich in challenging aspects at a time of massive change in the world, massive challenge, when people are at their extreme of control or out of control. So, is there a way out? Well, we have the winter solstice, 2021, on the 21st of December. And I would be surprised if you haven't had several conversations and discussions or even lectures on the importance of this. We mentioned it was the first one in air, except for 1981, for 200 years. It's an interesting chart. I've done this for London. You'll see it. You should do it for your own areas to see how it's like to affect your area. You can see how strong it is as far as England is concerned, with Saturn very close to the ascendant and a strong Capricorn energy in the 11th house. But a lot of stuff in the 12th house. There will be a lot of change going on in attitudes and restructuring. But I think it's important not to see the 20th of this period. Well, there's a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on the 20th, and then this is the vernal equinox the day after. It's important not to see that as the simple beginning of a new, wiser world because it's in air. While the way of Aquarius is to know everything, some Aquarians can be impossibly misguided in what they are sure they know, as are the machines and systems that some Aquarians create. So, there's so much Aquarian energy at the beginning of the 21st century, and it led to a tremendous arrogance in the place of science, and it wasn't a very good time for astrology at all. The ingenuity of artificial intelligence could control a cashless system. What we've got to do is link together shopping loyalty cards and credit debit cards with the government revenue system. Then the income, expenditure and lifestyle choices of populations could be determined in the interest of its controllers. With the, I don't know what it's like in America, but in Britain, most shopkeepers are very reluctant to accept cash. They want you to pay by contactless credit card or debit cards. I mean, it's almost preparing the ground. In some places in Sweden, shops are not accepting cash before the COVID-19 happened. We could get to a situation where we lose independence as far as what we do with our money is concerned, because it all has to go through a system that is not necessarily in our control. That's a rather negative way of looking at the Aquarian future. It's not necessarily always positive. And if that was to happen, then anyone who didn't want to play the game could be abandoned in a kind of rebellious dystopian counterculture. Those who read Brave New World will know a little bit about what I'm talking about in Aldous Huxley's book, where oppressive central government could cite as the terrible alternative of not accepting their way. There's also the Hunger Games film quartet is another sort of example that might be a bit like this. But there's another positive Aquarian approach, which starts by dismissing the unprincipled, mistaken economic theory that lies at the core of today's social global malaise. We need to base our economy on practical reality, environmental reality, and the social need of all beings near and far. Only an 18th century adventurer about to exploit a new untouched world will believe that growth was sustainable exponentially. Growth is always said, growth is our solution. If you only even get more growth, then everything will fit into place. We'll pay our debts, we'll have a better life, we can have more and more and more. But like, that's not Jupiter and Saturn, that's Jupiter. It's Jupiter gone crazy. It's deluded Jupiter, but it's the way of the world. It's the assumption of the present economic system. It's not a system, in my submission, that is sustainable. But it's been the basis of our system for the last 200 years or more, 300 years. So what comes next after the winter solstice? We've got Jupiter now going forward. It squares Pluto on the 23rd of December, still in Capricorn and Aries, or Aries Capricorn. But it then moves into Taurus. It then squares Jupiter, Saturn, now it's Taurus Aquarius, semi-squares Neptune, conjuncts Uranus, and then squares Jupiter. Now, the most interesting one of those, of course, I mean, we are now talking about Taurus and Aquarius. Is not this the story of facing up to the practical reality and the change that's needed? It could well be that by the end of the year, we can actually begin to see our way out of the impossible crisis we're in the middle of at the moment. There may be the beginnings of a vaccine. We may be able to start planning for a future. And this Taurus Aquarius period could be the fledgling beginning of sensible restructuring if we have the intelligence to grasp the possibility. I know it's disharmonious, I know it's square, I know it's stress, but how else will we get out of this but by facing stress? So it could be the wiser you go, the more you take your policy beyond, oh, we've got to bounce back to growth and we've got to do anything to get back to that, to get back to as it was. It's that easy. It isn't that easy. The more we look at reality, the more we are likely to see some wisdom coming out as we build through 2021. But of course, we have the presidential inauguration, and I don't know how much you want to talk about that in the discussion period when we come to it, but probably the most interesting thing is the relationship of the nodal axis to President Trump's birth node. I don't know if you've looked at that, but that is fascinating. Right. From election day until the this particular inauguration day. But the inauguration chart is particularly challenging. Grail, did you want to say something? No?
Inadvertently said, right. I meant to, I have muting myself again.
It's all right. I really don't mind people getting involved in a little while, if they have to get involved straight away, but certainly soon. I'm coming to a point where I am hoping to not just talk at you, but listen to you and interact with you. So get ready for that, because I hope you've got a lot to, and we can go back on these points and look at them in more detail. I'm just trying to give you the whole picture at the moment. This is the most dramatic chart I've seen for a presidential inauguration. I mean, you could see when Obama was first inaugurated in 2008, how it fitted his chart so perfectly. You could see when Donald Trump became president in 2017, how if you really thought about it, you could have predicted it. This one is more difficult, and it certainly is more serious. If you look at the fact that Uranus is in 6 degrees of Taurus, but where are we now? Uranus is in 6 degrees of Taurus, and Mars is about to conjunct it. That's the point I wanted to make on the day. So you've got a Mars-Uranus conjunction in the 12th house. You've got the Sun applying to that conjunction 6 days afterwards. You've got Saturn within 3 degrees of the conjunction, and Jupiter, the Mars is applying to square the Jupiter. Jupiter's just gone past the square to Uranus, just as you build up to the day. Mercury, a couple of weeks earlier, or a week or so earlier, was on the square too. And the moon, of course, is about to hit that halfway through the day. It's 12 o'clock. So by that evening, the moon will be conjuncted the Mars Uranus in Taurus. This is a very emotionally packed day. And this is done for Washington. It's just on the 12th, just in the 12th house. There's a tremendous amount of passion in this chart. And of course, it doesn't just indicate the day. The inauguration of the president's chart indicates the future of the country. When you look at the Pluto return coming up to less than just about 2 years after this, you can see what a challenging period this presidency is going to be. Whoever wins it, it's going to be a very, very difficult and challenging presidency to work with. But if you want to come back to that later, we can. But for the moment, I want to talk a little bit about André Barbeau, who many of you will have heard of. He's a great French astrologer and developer of mundane astrology, who died on his 98th birthday last year, in October last year. But in 2011, he wrote an amazing description of 2020, which included the possibility of a virus, but he also explained the whole situation, the whole social situation. And he did a study many years ago on the relationship between Mars retrograde and the point where the Sun comes to the retrograde and direct point in the cycle. As I say, retrogrades are not just a question of on and on. There's a lot of other things happening as well. I forgot to mention, by the way, that as well as Mercury going into retrograde on the 14th of October, it makes a direct station on election day in America on the 3rd of November. And if you've noticed that, which is going to be very interesting because Mercury retrograde and direct stations have an interesting relationship with the American election of presidents, as you'll know if you go back to the year 2000. However, getting back to Andre's point on Mars retrograde and direct stations, when the Sun crosses that point, he sees that can be a significant development in the energy of that. So the Sun's transit to the Mars direct station, which is the chart that we've got on the left-hand side here, is, you can see, well, let's just take the 2 key points I've picked out. It's a time of energetic, realistic understanding. Venus just moving into Gemini, applying to trine Mars, or it's exactly trining Saturn, of course, and will be trining Mars in a day or so from that point. And also, the Mercury is just conjuncted Neptune. And it's in a semi-square actually to Uranus, almost an exact semi-square to Uranus, which is on the midheaven. So I see this as a time of energetic, emerging realistic understanding, which is the green aspect, but only an early breakthrough of what could lead to substantial change. Mercury just past the Neptune conjunction to semi-square Uranus on the midheaven. If the first glimmering of hope of recovery of the COVID-19 situation is just about there around the winter solstice point of time, then this could be the beginning of the possibility of the vaccine being available to the population more generally. And then we get to the next one where the Sun's transit is to the retrograde station. Here we have a major progress in understanding with the sun just completing its square to Pluto. See, the sun's just completed it, and Mercury, literally the moment the sun makes its connection to the point where Mars was when it made a retrograde station, 28 degrees 08 Aries. It's got past the 2 days earlier, it's square to Pluto, and Mercury is literally, for just a few moments that earlier that day, got past its square to Pluto. I always feel that when tension, stress aspects are just completing, it's a time of release. It's a bit like you're pushing, 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 pushing. Finally, you make the breakthrough. It's a very positive moment, really, as long as you haven't been stupid in the way you've been pushing. If you've been wise, if you've been pushing wisely, if you use the strength, the positive potential of pressure, then you can have great effect. It's only when you go crazy and start complaining and become neurotic and nasty and throw out that things go wrong. So that is a very powerful moment of possibility, I think, that, even though it's a negative aspect. But it must be with realistic wisdom concerning the pros and cons of the situation. We have, where are we now? Yeah, Jupiter, what's happening here? Saturn sextile trine. Oh, it's the second one. A time, yeah, sorry, there's three here and I'm getting ahead of myself. So the second one is a time for urgent action on what we now understand. And this is Jupiter, Moon, Mars. Mars is particularly trine to Jupiter, almost just past an exact trine. The Moon has been trining it a few hours earlier. So this is a time for urgent action. We want to get on with it. You know, it's Aquarius, Gemini. Let's start getting it across that we're going to make a breakthrough, you know. But, and our third one, the nodal axis down to Saturn. Saturn is sextile trine the nodal axis. Saturn, sextile trine the nodal axis. Realistic wisdom concerning the pros and cons. This, for me, is a moment of breakthrough as long as we don't rush at it in an unrealistic and stupid way. And when I was preparing this talk, because for a long time I haven't been willing to look beyond the winter solstice this year. It's the first time doing this talk that I've looked beyond the winter solstice. And I might be wrong, but I've got a feeling that we're going to see our way coming out of this situation next year. As long as we're not stupid and lose all our friends and start brutalizing everything right, left and center and thrashing out in silly, superficial ways, we start making decent relationships internationally and nationally and within our own society and between groups in society, we can come out of this in a very positive way and cooperate together to make a much better world, rather like we were at the end of World War II. And being born just before the World War II, I remember the world coming out of World War II, and it was a time of incredible kindness and optimism. And we could get that again if we stop being so nasty towards each other. And this could be a good marker point. And it's interesting, it's just after next year's vernal equinox. So the winter solstice, there's just a few issues we have to resolve if we're going to do that. So I think we've got to get, this is my ideas now. I might be wrong, but let's just see if you make any sense, and we might discuss it if you want to. We're coming very close to the end now. Over-reliance on models of mechanical science rather than humane understanding of and support for other people and the planet is leading to a breakdown in social personal relationships caused by get back to things again, the acquisition of things, seeing life as a struggle with others, them and us, and that leads to the idealization of constant growth, which means overactivity in travel and consumption, battling with each other like rats trapped in a box, destroying and not replacing the planet's natural resources. Isn't this so much that the things that the COVID has stopped us doing are the very things we ought to contain and adjust a bit? It's like there's some mastermind forcing us not to be so blinking stupid, you know. I don't know, maybe I'm fancifying. So we're destroying, not replacing the planet's natural resources, and that's leading to world bankruptcy caused by excessive unsustainable borrowing and destruction of the global infrastructure. Because money is not the root of all evil, but it's become so. We need to see money as a good servant, but see money as a good servant, but a poor master, as I was saying earlier. COVID-19 is stopping the world in its tracks, is blocking our economic and social excesses in consumption and travel, threatening to wipe out millions of people. Do we respond by propping up the present system until we have a vaccine, then recover and carry on as before? Or crucially, do we see COVID-19 as opening doors to our letting go of the failed present model and instead rebalance the very core of how we do business with and relate to each other? So that is the big question that we're confronted with. And fortunately, we don't hear it in the news that much, but in the background there are economists, they're not astrologers, but they're suggesting very different socially ethical economic models of showing how we could do business with each other in a sustainable way. And these are real hard-headed, realistic economists. This lady, Mariana Mazzucato, who wrote a book called The Value of Everything, if you just remember the value of everything and type it into Amazon or wherever else you want to search for a book, it is very worth reading it. Two of the crucial points she makes is that a lot of where we say growth is happening is in fact taking money away. So if your stock market prices go up, you're actually taking things, not giving things. You've got to ask yourself what is really giving and what is really taking in society. This is nothing to do with communism and all that sort of stuff. It's to do with practical economics. You know, if you just artificially have a lot of money, if I suddenly throw a lot of money at you and say, go and have a good time, you think I was being very wasteful. But this is what we're doing with a lot of our economic activity all the time. So that's worth reading to show what's wrong with our present system. And then there's this other book, called Donut Economics by Kate Raworth. Now, at the moment, this is our model. This is our economic model. Over time, we want the GDP to get more and more, or profits. We want more and more. But we can't have more and more. It's a bit like children. Mummy, can I have more sweets? No, darling, you can't. Oh, please, Mummy, I'll scream if you don't give it to me. But you can't have it. You can't have more sweets forever. It'll make you sick. I want my sweets. We're like that. It's as simple as that. The whole world economy is based on that. And when things go wrong, oh, well, if you just give me more sweets, I'll stop crying. So there is an alternative model. And it takes, again, if you're listening to this, just sit and look at it for about 10 minutes or so and consider. She's talking about the social foundation, what we need as a society, the central wall. We need water, we need food, we need energy, we need health, we need networks, we need education, housing, income and work, gender equality, peace and justice, social equality, a voice in politics. This is what we as a people want to have. We live in a planet that's got an ecological ceiling. Do you see that at the top, ecological ceiling? And we have issues of climate change, the ozone layer depletion, ocean acidification, chemical pollution, air pollution, biodiversity loss, land conversion, fresh water withdrawals, nitrogen and phosphorate loading. So all these issues, we've got to somehow find a safe space for how we relate to the environment and how we share what we need with each other. And the economy should be based on this, not on just growth. And to say you can't afford to be sensible, you know, it's crazy. You know, if we overshoot, we destroy our environment and can't have anything. If we go short, if we let the environment restrict us too much, then we do without, you know, we starve and we suffer. We've got to get that balance, and we need an economy that's based on this. And this to me sounds very Aquarian. So is that likely to be something? It won't necessarily be that, but something along these lines, or at least something that deals with these issues. Is that likely to happen over the coming 5 years? I don't know if you've ever used the time graphs in Solar Fire, but you need to put out a list of events and then click for the time graph, and this is what you got. And what I've done here is put just the outer planetary main relationships, that squares, trines, and conjunctions, just those three main aspects, and their ingresses or occupation in a sign. So that if you see where it's black, it's when those events happen, right? Those three times. When you're talking about the planet in a sign, this is when it goes into Pisces. It's going back, it's going to Pisces again. It always gets a bit confusing here because you see, you've got to look down at when it goes into Aries, you see. So it's moved back out of Pisces, it goes back into Pisces. It's gone into, what's happened here is it's gone back into Aquarius, and then it moves into Pisces again. And then it goes on into, and then it moves back into Pisces, but then you've got to look down and see when it's in Aries, and then you've got to look down at Taurus or Pisces, you see. So Jupiter moves into Aries, back into Pisces, and then back into Aries again, and so on. It's a little bit confusing when you first look at it, but if you say that when it's red, it's moving back into a sign, okay, and yeah, when it's red, it's moving back. You know, it was in Pisces, it's moving back into Aquarius because that's in red. Then you get the idea. But the way to look at it then is to say, well, what's happened in 2021? Well, first of all, we got Saturn squaring Uranus. So 2021 is very much a year of Saturn is in Aquarius, square Uranus in Taurus. It's a year of difficult change, where we have to accept lots and lots of adjustments. This is the dominance of the year right from beginning to end. But Jupiter starts off in Aquarius, you see, but it moves into Pisces, and then it moves back into Aquarius for much of the year. Then it moves back into Pisces in at the end of the year. So it is a time mainly of transformation and revolution. Then you can apply the same thing to 2022, where you've got Jupiter moving into Pisces. It moves into Aries down here in the middle of the year, then back into Pisces at the end of the year, and then back in for just a month or so, then back into Aries. You see how it works? It also conjuncts Neptune just around the beginning of the second quarter. And so you can go through each of the years and see what is going on and how it's likely to develop. It's a very good way of seeing how the planets are likely to be working together through the years. To get a quick overview is this method. And I want to leave you with some tools to do a lot of thinking about this. And the last chart I'm going to show is when Pluto finally leaves Capricorn this time. And it's not until the 19th of November 2024. Now, it does leave and move into Aquarius a little bit in 23, but then it moves back into Capricorn until the 19th of November 2024. And you can see that by then, with Pluto moving into Aquarius, Neptune is getting close to moving out into Aries. Mars is in Leo, which is interested, almost opposed to it. And let's have a look now. Jupiter's in Gemini. Uranus is in Taurus, coming up to Gemini. We get a very, very different sense of feeling. This is very much an unfolding of possibility, a greater wisdom, a massive change, and I think more a new generation of leadership and understanding coming into the world. It could be very refreshing, but we've got to get through a hell of a lot first, and we've got to get through it in the right way. So these are some concluding points. With Pluto in Capricorn until then, and Jupiter moving into Pisces next year, the next few years will be transitional. Even with the wisest decisions, demands of the old system will remain to resist change. The suffering of deprivation will bite deeply into many societies. The old ways will not relent without a struggle. Populist leaders may encourage scapegoating and narrow self-interest as the only solution for us. Now, this doesn't have to happen for another day longer than we let it happen. You know, it's happening now, but don't let it happen any longer. if you don't buy into it, it won't happen. After a Jupiter burst, how we handle the resilience of Saturn in Aquarius will be crucial if there is to be real change through the Pluto in Aquarius post 2024 years. Be clear about your want for the future, look for, demand, and also accept with glorious hope the inconveniences of real change. That's all I've got to say. So that's my conclusion, having thought about all this, but we are at this incredible change. If you want to know more about the idealism that drives my work, if you go to any browser, Google, Safari, Firefox, Edge, and type The Anthem of Love, Roy Gillett, you can listen either to the whole poem, the prologue, or just the main poem. But I read this, and it really does invoke an idealistic view of the world and its people, very positive view. And one is 4 minutes, the other one is 7. If you're interested in what I've been saying and you want to give more meat to it, then just listen to that. It's on the way. It's on YouTube. I've got these books. The top one is an introduction to astrology. It's the book to give to anyone who's questioning the validity of astrology, because it says, look, spend 2 months with this book, learn what you're talking about, try it out, and then tell me you don't agree with it. But until you've done that, you've got no right to an opinion. It's a beautiful color book with lots of explanations. You can learn what it means. You can interpret your own. You can create your own chart and interpret it. The other books are more about my opinions and understanding of astrology. Astrology and Compassion, my main theories about what astrology's role should really be in society. Economy, Ecology and Kindness I wrote after 2008, suggesting how we might get a better world out of it. And in 2017 to 18, I wrote Reversing the Road to Global Destruction, which is, you haven't found it out yet. And I published this about 2 years ahead of what we're going through at the moment. It's almost like coronavirus is coming to nudge us, I don't know. So those, if you're interested, are ways of carrying on with the ideas and finding them more articulately put, probably in considered prose, than I could do in just throwing all this at you in 90 minutes. I'm stopping now. I'm hoping to hear from you. Gail, is there anybody want to say anything or ask any questions or go back to points in more detail?
Well, there was the question about what you thought about the cryptocurrency. Mm-hmm. And then there was another person who asked about the voting date of the Electoral College, which I think pretty closely coincides with the solstice chart that you...
So let's have a look here. So we've got the Electoral College. That is sometime in December, isn't it? What date is that? Anybody know that? College votes? We can check it up online if we don't know.
Wasn't it that, Tom, did you know that the 20th or something?
No, Derek had put up a link to Wikipedia.
It's 12/14. Yeah. Here, Liz got it. December 14, Roy. December 14. Okay,
hang on a minute. Wait a minute. Oops, that's not the right chart. That's Donald Trump. How did that get up there? Wait a minute. All right. So
December 14 in Washington, DC.
14, 12, 20 tab. What sort of time will they know? Do you have any idea of time it's likely when it's usually decided? Because it's a foregone conclusion, so they just meet usually, isn't it?
It's in Washington, DC too. About noon in Washington, DC.
Okay.
About noon. It's just a good date.
Does that look right? I better say Electoral College, give it a proper title. Decides. Okay. Right. What do you think? It's pretty mutable, isn't it?
Yes.
Does anybody want to unmute themselves and make a comment on this chart? I mean, I'm quite happy to start interpreting it myself, but I wonder if anybody has any specific ideas about it. If not, I'll have a go at it, but. Okay, well, you know, it's Sagittarius. Well, it's nearly always Sagittarius when this is decided. Of course, that's every time the electoral college is this sort of time of year. So there'll always be a lot of planets in Sagittarius, but it's the day of a new moon in Sagittarius. And it's Mercury conjunct very close to it, moving forward. And it's all on the midheaven. And it's in a T-square, sorry?
And the alignment of the nodes with that, the nodal axis with that closely.
Yeah, yeah, the nodes are very important. And this is, now I'm going to do this now. I think I have to do it. Wait a minute. Let me just give me a moment here. We have to look, we have to deal with this one because it is significant.
It's an eclipse. It's a solar eclipse.
Is it really? Yes, yes, it will. Yes, of course it is. Yes.
Yeah, and that is on Donald Trump's moon.
Yeah.
But not
it's
only
interesting that Kamala Harris has that same nodal axis, and she has Gemini rising with the node with that nodal axis. So,
that is very interesting. But you see, look now. This is she has the same nodal axis. Well, because
yes,
like what I was checking this up yesterday because someone pointed this out that Donald Trump's node was right on. It goes to inauguration day. I just have to take my word for it. I don't want to keep on changing charts on the screen, but like on election day, the nodes are quite close to his nodal axis, and then they fiddle around. If you take true node and not mean node, if you take true node, they fiddle around. By the time you get to the inauguration date, they're still fiddling around on his nodal axis. And if Kamala Harris has got the same as well, that's quite interesting. But like you're right, and of course, Donald Trump was born on a lunar eclipse, wasn't he? If I remember right.
Yes.
Yeah, there we are.
right.
And now we've got a solar eclipse on his. Yeah, so nodes are bound to be there because of that. But wait a minute.
Kamala Harris is October 20, 1964 at 9:28 p.m. and she's got the North Node on her ascendant at 24 Gemini.
Okay, shall I put that one up as well? Wait a minute, let's do that one as well while we're at it. So we go, I thought I'd done her chart actually. Have I got it here or not? Maybe not. Oh yeah, here we are. I think I've got it. See, I've got it right. I think I got this from Astro Data Bank, so it should be okay. Yeah, I've got it there. Is that right? Does that look like the right chart? Can you see it all right? Do you want me to put it fully up? Is that...
Yes,
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so let's put the 3 charts up. Let's do it properly. No, I mean, Joe Biden still exists as well, but yeah. Right, so sorry, this is a lot going on with my fiddling with my computer here. Right, so let's get to the 3. So we want, let's put Joe up as well, shall we? Donald, Kamala, and election college. Oops, what happened there? Sorry, I'm pressing the wrong button. Try again. Election college decides. Kamala. No, that was the wrong button, wasn't it? Yeah, let's get you right. It's the 3rd time lucky. Control. Kamala, Donald, Joe. View 4 wheels. There we go. Can you see that all right, or is it too? I don't think it's going to be better like that. No, it isn't. Can you? Oh, where did it go? Come back. I don't know if you can see the detail clearly enough. I can on my screen. I hope you can on yours.
Yeah.
So you've got the college deciding. You've got Kamala Harris is on her ascendant, which is the descendant of the college. It's just that T square to, what is it, in 20 degrees. So It's a T-square to Neptune, isn't it? Venus semi-sextile to the Capricorn energy impulsio. Where is that Venus compared to her chart? Venus. Yeah, Venus is quite, Chiron is quite close to the Neptune. I don't know. I have been puzzling over these charts for, this is a new set of things that I've been looking at, but I've been puzzling over them for a while. I still can't see. I can see how Donald Trump is going to, whatever happens, whether he wins or not, he's going to be a figure in the inauguration of some kind, a figure of negativity if he loses and a figure of triumph if he wins. You know, I don't think he's going to go away, or his vision, the vision of him is going to go away right up to that, because the node is so close to his node, and therefore, you know, you'd think it would really, it's going to be a day for him. And also, if I think right, there's a Jupiter at this time, is also in Taurus, and I know what's going on. It's Jupiter's retrograding, but oh, that's Camilla. Where we got to? Here we are, Jupiter. Yeah, well, Jupiter will be in Aquarius by the time of the inauguration, and if we look at his chart, I know there was some very special thing for him when he had the election in 17, but I haven't prepared this as thoroughly as I might have done. But just let's look at forget about the people for the moment and just look at the electoral college chart. It doesn't suggest that Jupiter is the ruler of the ascendant, is in the 11th house, ruled by Saturn, which is in the 11th house.
Roy, wouldn't an eclipse on the south node be a release or a letting go?
Yeah, it could be, but you see, what I'm struggling with also is the eastern and western view of the nodal axis. For the Vedic astrologer, or the Vedic astrologer I've spoken, so I don't know, it's all of them, I've always been told that the south node is the place of the home, the comfort, the place where you feel familiar, and the place where the wise and humble man would therefore go. And the north node is where you tend to go beyond yourself. You get overstretched. You try to go. You overreach yourself. Yeah. And of course, from the western point of view, we tend to see I mean, when I first started astrology, I was told the north node is the point of advantage and the south node is the point of disadvantage, because you haven't got any aspiration if your south node is prominent, but you have if your north node is prominent. It's a different mentality. And I think when you take somebody like Donald Trump, you know, this north node so close to the sun, what is it? Well, let's put it up there and I'll tell you. His north node place as it is. Let's get there somewhere. Yeah, with his north node so close to his sun, and also with Mars so close to Regulus and his ascendant Regulus, as his Regulus is just about here, just on his ascendant, and that Mars not far behind, and the north node there, you get this incredible picture of a person who's so full of himself, so excessively full of himself, you know. So from a Vedic point of view, say this person is a spiritually immature person. That would be the Vedic interpretation. The Western interpretation might be this is a man who knows where he's going. He knows how to get there. You know, he's got lots of get up and go. And say with astrology, you've got to try and put politics to one side and try to sort of just look at the symbols. And I mean, not everybody in Western astrology would say it was a good position, but you know, it's the difference. So now we're coming up to him being so involved astrologically with the college and also with the inauguration chart. You get a feeling that something, well, there's a lot's going to happen in the next few weeks, obviously before the election and afterwards, that it's going to be a drama right the way through until we get past inauguration day, I think. And who knows what will happen next, you know.
It's interesting. It's interesting that Kamala Harris's progressed sun is on her descendant.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2023, her progressed moon will be conjunct her north node and the ascendant. And if Biden was to get in and you look at his transits for around that mid period of 2023, it looks to me like he could be very ill at that time and Kamala Harris could take over.
Yeah. Donna Page is trying to get in, girl.
I let her in. I let her in.
Hello, Donna. Yeah. Thank you for that. Thanks for that. You've done really good research on it, Robin. I mean, it is an amazing time. But can we? I mean, I don't know how much you want to focus on. You know?
Well, can we speak to that period, the Uranus Saturn square? I mean, you alluded to previous Uranus and Taurus periods as fascist, periods of fascism.
Yeah. Well, it's not just Uranus in Taurus. It's the Neptune combination. It's that sort of Neptune in Virgo, trying to Uranus in Taurus. I will destroy the world if necessary to create the master race. That was the attitude of Hitler. It was the attitude of the Japanese leadership. In a way, it was the attitude of Stalin as well, And now we've got Neptune sextile to Uranus. Is that right? Yeah. Neptune in Pisces, sex Uranus in Taurus. And everybody's trying to get you. The immigrants are coming. The Muslims are coming, the blacks are coming, the white men are coming, whichever side you're looking at it. We're all victims, and I've got to protect you against victimization. And everybody sees one group as a victim, not everybody, but a lot of people are frightened of it's fear. It's particularly with the 1930s fascism, it was you might have been frightened of that kind of force of Hitler's war and everything else, but it wasn't the same sort of right in your guts, if you like, fear of the foreigner in quite the way that is being invoked at the moment. And I'm not just talking about one leader and one man here. I'm seeing it all over the world. You can see it in ISIS, as it happened, a few years ago. You can see it in the European attitude, particularly in Hungary, towards immigrants. You can see it in what's happening in India. It's happening all over the world. What's blowing up in Azerbaijan at the moment, it's everywhere. There's this kind of lack of fellow feeling for other people. You're either the victim, you're either Cinderella, or you're the ugly stepsister or the ugly stepmother, And it's why it's so important to say this at the moment is that if we're going to come out of this coronavirus, there's not a world where we can survive by saying me first and throwing everybody on the scrap heap. It's just going to get worse until we stop doing that and we start working together. And that might seem a bit of a preaching thing, but I think the astrology says it as well. It's the astrology is, very much I feel with astrology that anything can happen. We have freedom to choose whether we're going to ruin our lives or make our lives a blessing and the lives of others a blessing. What astrology does, it doesn't give us good and bad, it gives us opportunity to understand. And every aspect, be it a harmonious aspect or a negative aspect, can turn out terribly or well, or something in between, depending on the way we handle it and the way we use it. if we're very rich, if we waste our money, then it's going to turn out badly for us, however good the transits are to our Jupiter. And if we're very poor or we struggle and strain, if we master it, we become great. I mean, great athletes work through pressure. They don't work necessarily always by the Jupiter trining their Mars on the right day. It's not as easy as that, you know. So when we come up to a massive crisis, this is probably the greatest challenge, this Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, sorry, Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, and the Uranus in Taurus, this Earth pressure that we go through this year is really saying to us, look, you can't go on like this any longer. You've got to change. And yet we haven't yet got to that stage of accepting it. We still think we can prop it all up and go back to normal next year. And I think it's a bit more difficult than that. And it's going to become much easier when we accept that it's just like when you think of the world. I remember my early memories are the end of World War II, with the whole of Europe pretty well destroyed, with Berlin flattened, with holes in the road all around me, having lived through bombs over my head, you know, and the refugees wandering all over Europe, worse than it is for people coming from the Middle East trying to get into Europe at the moment. And somehow goodwill rebuilt the world, and that's what must happen now. And if we don't realize that, we're going to keep on making matters worse until we do. And because the environmental energy is so challenging right now, it's not even like after World War I, II rather, because, you know, the environment, we've got so good at exploiting the environment that the environment will come and get us, even if we don't, if nothing else does. So, no, sorry, I'm just going on about idealism, but this is what the astrology says. And I was supposed to be about the New World Economy. I've given you a clue about the donut idea. I think something like that is the New World Economy. Now, somebody asked me to talk about Bitcoin, and I've dodged it. I haven't read the book yet. I don't know if the guy who asked about Bitcoin is the guy who sent me the book. I'm very grateful for that. I will study it. But my feeling at the moment is that Bitcoin is just another way of organizing the world. Now, obviously, if you could completely objectify the currency system away from the system of control, then theoretically that might be a change, but it still will have some sort of control. And what's happened with Bitcoin particularly is that it's gone on the market. So you can buy and sell it for dollars just like anything else. And it seems to me that the thing that will make the world a better place is our behavior, not a particular technical change. I might be open. I mean, obviously certain technical factors have to change, and Bitcoin might be a part of it. But, you know, it is what's in the heart of humanity that would really change the world, not the machinery we use. When we got our heart right, we will find the right machinery and use it properly. We haven't got our heart right, whatever machinery we've got, we're going to make a mess of it.
Oh, there is a question from Katrina. She says, are there any periods, potent aspects or transits during the 2021 to 2025 that seem strongly conducive to the arising of widespread democratic socialism or some other new type of movement?
Yeah, okay, right. So let's get, that's a very good question, and I'm going to get back to my PowerPoint now, and just going to close a few things down. Hang on a minute, because that's what we get back to that. You can close, even close solar fire, would you believe it? I'm going to do that. Let's get that out of the way. Right, here we go. So it's what we wanted to look at, wasn't it? Yeah, well, what I tried to explain when I was going through this, where are we now? What is it? I said all that. Oh, that's it before there, wasn't it? Oh. Sorry, I'm just trying to, I think I better do it this way, actually. So we've done that. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So that. I had, what happened to, there we go. This is what I wanted to look at. The first, yes, I did want to look at a slightly earlier one, actually, now come to think of it. I wanted to look at this. So the first thing is I was saying that Well, Mars squares Pluto. You should bear in mind that what we're going through at the moment is all to do with the retrograde square, which is mirroring what happened in March this year. So you've got the beginning of the virus then, you've got the return back to it now, and getting worse now, getting worse, more pressure, but it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse, definitely. And this is all to do with the Mars retrograde square to Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter, and its own positions and the positions as they were in March. So we have to go through it all again to learn our lesson. You know, it's a bit like if you didn't learn it the first time, learn it this time. That's what retrogrades are about, really. But once we get past the direct station in November and we struggle our way out of that to clarity, we're coming up to the end of December. We come to the Saturn Jupiter conjunction on the on the winter solstice, the 21st of, and then we get Mars conjunct Pluto. This is a action. This is an action of transformation. This is a challenge to rebuild. It's still Aries Capricorn, but it's the end of that Aries Capricorn process. It's the end of something that started in March and really has been building up towards the whole of this year from several years in the past. It really started in 2008 when Pluto went into Capricorn. The whole of the period from then, last 12 years, has been building to this moment of time, the Jupiter return this time. And all that stuff we've been looking at and going through at the moment, have been going through this year and building up to this year, comes to a kind of completion point when Mars squares Pluto on the 23rd of December. And then we're moving forward to a new phase, which is Mars into Taurus, Jupiter, Saturn in Aquarius. And although Pluto's still in Capricorn, it's no longer supported and so intensified by all these other planets. And so you get Mars in Taurus, then you get Mars conjuncting Saturn, or squaring Saturn rather. Now, this will be this is the challenge. What is that saying? How do we get out of this situation? Let's be intelligent about it. Let's be determined and desperate and suffering. Let's find an answer. This is what I'm forcing you to find an answer. If you don't find an answer, you're going to get worse, not better. That's the kind of energy of Mars square Saturn, Taurus to Aquarius. Then you get the square to Neptune, which is a bit of a confusion because there's a lot of confusion, no solution. Then you get the conjunction to Uranus. We've got to change, and that's on Inauguration Day. One would hope that would need a new beginning.
Roy, there was a question, I think they would go right in here with this about a stock market crash around then. You've got a lot of aspects there.
Well, I mean, the stock market will crash unless we keep throwing money at it. The stock market has crashed. It's crashing all the time. The only thing that's happened is we're throwing money at it. I mean, you know, Mum, can I have some sweets? We haven't got any money, darling. I'll give you some more money. Oh, I'll borrow some from Mrs. Smith next door. Then you can have some sweets. You know, I mean, the stock market we're in an absolute disaster. I mean, but because we put money in, because we keep on stimulating it and borrowing and so on and so forth. So it's the big question about this is we got well beyond, you know, in 2008, the government's bailed out the banks and sold or kept at bay the subprime situation. We've kept it going, kept the economy appearing to recover by more and more excessive borrowing. I showed you the borrowing earlier. I mean, this borrowing is much greater than 22 trillion. I think it's 22 trillion at the moment, the American debt, for example. So the stock market could go at any time, and it will go as soon as but it stops supported. It's not supported any longer. So no more debts. There's no more loans, rather, created, given to it, or no more quantitative easing. Whether it happens at this time, it could be, that could be it. It could be, look, we cannot support the markets any longer. I mean, nobody has an answer to the present economic system. We are in enormous debt. But if you look at that map I showed you earlier, that diagram, we were in an enormous debt situation at the end of World War II. And it gradually got resolved as we worked on it. But we completely restructured the way society was organized in order to do that. And this is what needs to happen. So you're asking this question about January. This is the kind of questions that people will be faced up to. Do we continue to borrow more money and try to stimulate the market and keep it going. This is an issue. I mean, it is a major issue. But until we actually stop, you know, Lehman Brothers not being supported caused a world economic crisis. And therefore they stopped doing that. They keep on supporting ever since. Central banks keep on creating more and more resources. I don't know if we can carry on doing this forever. It's beyond me. I just don't think it's the way to run the world economy, because it's got no checks and balances. It's all about, how can I put it? It's all about getting away with it. It's not about sustainability. It's about Jupiter and Saturn. You can't just have Jupiter all the time. So, you know, this Mars Uranus is where the big change has to happen. And then the Mars square to Jupiter is where we start implementing the big change. We start facing up to reality. Then we get to those two moments that I told you about in August, in April, which will, I think, start seeing if we can get people better. But then we come to this period that you were asking, the questioner was asking about, which is, let's get on to, here we go, which is, this 2021 is, as I said, the year of structural reorganization. I mean, this is the tragedy of the American presidential election, quite honestly. There needs to be an intelligent conversation about what we do next. We're not hearing too much from the Democrats. We're not hearing anything but a hope that we can get the stock market moving again from the Republicans. And we need a solution that is much more radical than that. And I think 2021, whichever the new government is going to be faced up to that. It's very likely, if things go the wrong way, that America could be facing bankruptcy by the end of the year, with a Pluto return coming in 2022. And even China could be taking over the economic dominance of the world in 2022 if America doesn't go right. But if you were to organize a international project for recovery to deal with the climate reality and the ecological reality, not just global warming, but the whole ecological reality, you know, with some sort of vision and idealism, then the give and take that will come between races and people would restructure the economy in ways we can hardly imagine at the moment. If there was that kind of goodwill out there, there was 46, 47, there was that kind of goodwill for a couple of years. It needs to come again. And the Aquarian Pisces, Jupiter, and the Saturn Uranus falls in the reality, you could get that in 2021. Of course, by the time you get to 2022, Jupiter is moving into Aries in May. You can see that there, Jupiter, go back. Jupiter moves into Aries in May and then goes into Aries, going back, or is it gone into Taurus? What's happening here? It's in Aries, it's still in Aries. Why is it? I don't know what that Aries
is.
It
goes into Pisces in October.
Yeah. It goes back to Pisces, you're right. And then it moves back into Aries. It's getting used to this. It's a brilliant diagram when you understand it. Right, so this is the new beginning, really. This is the struggle for what I've just described. This is the potential for a new beginning, a new start, clearing out the rubbish from the past, a new start, a new beginning, new leaders probably. A lot of people are impressed by the leader of New Zealand, the young woman who runs New Zealand. She's really on the ball as far as when anything needs to happen, she does make it happen. She doesn't fiddle around. If she gets re-elected this year, it'd be very good for New Zealand, I think. But this is a new beginning. And then we get to 2023. We've got Saturn changing sign, moving into a Pisces from Aquarius. And then Pluto beginning to, look at that, March, you're beginning the Aquarius Pisces. You see this long period of sensitive restructuring with a taste for new, unusual beginnings all the way through these years. I can get this feeling coming out of the sort of confrontation with reality into a new possibility, into a restructuring. Jupiter moves into Taurus in 2023, which is quite positive, I think. But it does square Pluto, so, you know, there is reality. Pluto, and of course, Pluto goes back into Capricorn for a while, doesn't finally, and it keeps on going backwards a bit, doesn't it? It goes into Aquarius, comes back into Capricorn, goes into Aquarius. So as a double, but this is the struggle, this is the birth pangs, if you like, of a new kind of economy, an economy that can only survive if it's based on decency between people, in my opinion. What it's going to look like in 2025, I don't know. But Andre Babu, when he was talking about this, and there's the World Cyclic Index. Have you? I don't know how many of you have seen the Cyclic Index. I don't know if I can find that quickly, but there is a way of combining the positions of all the planets. If you've got time, I will try and find it in another. Is that all right? Do you want me to look for it? I should be able to find it in another talk that I gave. This one. No, we're doing. Yeah, that should be here. This talk. You've got to be there, aren't you? No, it's not a sausage nuisance.
Was this part of your talk today?
Sorry?
That astrology of a new capitalism, was that part of your talk today?
No. This is the one I gave before. I'm trying to find a particular diagram that's particularly relevant to what I'm talking about. Maybe it's in here. I've given a number of talks on this subject. These are just other ways of doing it.
It would be great if you could get Mariana Mazzucato to come and talk on that.
Well, she's not an astrologer.
I know, but
yeah,
she's brilliant. I love her.
Oh, you know her work, yeah?
Ah, awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen her on television several times. She's absolutely amazing. Oh, this is really a dirty trick. I really would like to show you this. I might be able to do it on the web, actually. Let's see if I can do it that way. But I better close this one down. File close. So who's that saying? Who is it who's saying they know Marilyn's work?
Katrina.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, I've been listening to her for a few years. It always gives me hope. And so when I hear, when I see things like the rise of Bernie Sanders and AOC and Mariana, it's like there's obviously a lot of energy for change. But the other fixed, established status quo is still stronger.
Well, I just want to say, were you there when I was doing that thing on the Kate Ralph as well, her donut economy?
Yeah, I listened to her TED Talk just recently too.
Yeah, she's definitely worth listening to. But it's very interesting because there's another book. They talk about iconocracy. After the 2008 crash, they're young kids going to university for the first time, and everything was falling around about them, and economically, and all the great experts were being shown wrong. And they went to university and found they're being taught exactly the same stuff as brought the world to the crisis. Yeah. And what their vague argument was, look, nobody actually, this system of so-called economic science is something that a bunch of mechanical mathematicians or something have worked out without any decision from the people. They wanted the world to be organized this way. Yeah. And economics should be based on human need and human reality and the reality of the planet, not on whether you can persuade someone to trade and what will happen if you can or can't. Right. And they started this process of starting to pamphleteer for a more socially responsible economics. Mariana, of course, has really forensically analysed the intrinsic faults of the whole system that we're running on. And the donut, the Kate Rowse book, is the kind of a kind of positive alternative solution. I'm just going to see if I can find this cyclic index on the web, because I've got it all over my stuff, but I can't find it quickly. And it's always the same when you're in the middle of a talk. You don't want to. Is this any good? Yeah, but I don't know if it'd be the right year. That's the trouble. Cyclic index. Oh, this is horrible. It's not very clear at all, is it? Which one is that? What year is that? Oh, this one. Oh, there's the one. This is the one. Come on. Right. Now, I could show you the one for the 20th century as well, and show you how it related to the ups and downs. This is the one I'm talking about, this one over here, right? Now, what this is you take the separation between all the outer planets from Jupiter. I think it's just from Jupiter outwards. And they're either, that degree of separation is either increasing or diminishing, right? And you add them all up and you create a graph, so that as the total of the separations diminish, it goes down. And as the number of degrees goes up, and therefore you get what's called a cyclic index, which is supposed to be a diagrammatic representation of the pressures of all the outer planets combined on one graph, right? And this is for the 21st century is amazing. It calls the First and Second World Wars and even the 1990s and everything. But this is for our present time. And I'll tell you, you can't quite see it, but or you can't see the other diagrams, but this is the most sensational shift. There's nothing like that in the 20th century. And we have quite a few things happening in the 20th century, didn't we? This is where we are right now. This is the Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, Uranus thing I've been talking about. And we're going to go right the way up. This is 2025 up the top here. And this is the process we have to go through between then and now. And Andre says that it may well be by the time we get to 2025, we'll start to see a new, more healthy and better thing. And it's all transitional between this and that. It's not as if we're moving to utopia, but we're getting out of the total mire of confusion and aggression and negativity and nastiness. And the big hope is that we start this process next year. You know, and you can see how it's possible from what I've shown you in the aspects that we could be. If we don't, it's a very dire future. But I've got a fairly positive, I've been holding back on being anything, saying anything beyond 2020 until recently, but I've got a feeling we're going to come out of this all right in the end. But we're going to come out kicking and screaming, and there's going to be a lot of people who are not going to let go very easily. And we've got to be very clear and kind.
What is it measure? What is it measuring, Roy? Up at the very top of the 100, where it hits at 2025. What is 100? What? Yeah. What is the 100 and the 50?
I think it's a percentage of shift. You know, it's based on degree separation. So, for example, you take.
That's okay. I don't need to know the math, but it's just saying it's not like 100% better, or it's not like
it's
a
the
good
extremity.
or bad.
It's the extremity. I mean, it's a pity. I wish I could have found the diagram from the 19th century, because you could see how it works out. The bottom isn't necessarily bad and the top isn't necessarily good. Okay. Although generally the bottoms tend to be more aggressive than the tops. I don't know if there's there's not a 20th century here, I don't think. What's that one? No, that's oh, that's me. That's my. They printed my one. It's from my talk. Why can't I find the earlier one? Wait a minute, this is my one. What's going on here? Oh, there's Andre Babu. Well, I clicked one, but it didn't appear. Where did it go? Wait a minute. Is it? Yeah. We should go a bit bigger. Don't get a bit bigger. Yeah, okay. Well, this is the one I created, actually. They must have grabbed this from the talk I gave to OPA. It's an OPA talk, is it? Okay. World War One. There's World War One, for example, 1914 to 1918. But there's World War Two. Yeah, there's World War Two. But that's the Dow See, it goes up crazy. There's the Wall Street crash of 29 up the top there. There's World War II. There's the that's the beginning of monetarist economics, which I think was a major blunder. This is the, you know, I mean, the world was in a confused mess in the 1970s for a lot of reasons, which are a bit historical to go into now. But when we decided to just say, hey, if you've got a lot of money, you're all right. But then when we got to 2000, when the banks collapsed in 2008, we said, oh, well, we can't afford, you know, everybody's got a lot of money in the banks theoretically, so we can't allow them to collapse. So the whole theory of monetarism collapsed in 2008. We refused to accept it. But you can see this monetarist economics is down the bottom there. And then what is this one? This is the Soviet Union collapse in 1989. And then it goes right up to the top, which is when you get down to here, down to this one, which is the 21st century. And that is, of course, the dot-com crash. And you can see the dot-com crash coming. The crashes seem to be from tops and the wars seem to be from bottoms. And that's what we're going through at the moment. You get it?
Yeah, thanks. Okay, my last question, could you read it, Gail, about the Kali Yuga?
No, I haven't read it. I've been fiddling around my screen.
Well, she said something about, well, Daniel Jamario talked about the Kali Yuga ending in 2025 when he was here earlier this year. And so it does seem to coincide with this Pluto return and all this stuff that's going on. But then we go from the end of the Kali Yuga for 300 years of transition. I don't know if you're familiar with that timeline.
The Kali Yuga is a phrase that's used by many different disciplines in lots of ways. The Tibetans and some of the Hindus take a much longer perspective than just 2025. We're living in a very powerful time of ignorance, but at the same time, you know, the whole idea is that you know what, the Buddhist perspective is that you're born to in this wonderful future situation of a world that is imperfect and will never be perfect. So it's like a heavenly highway. If you can actually master the challenges of this world, then you can become enlightened. And this is the only opportunity. In many other sorts of ways of being born, you can't really get enough control over your life to really change it. And so why is this relevant? Well, because the time we're going through at the moment is a nadir point. As you can see it from the diagram I've shown you, it's a nadir point. Here we are down there, 20, of a very dark period of time, a period of incredible greed and selfishness and thoughtlessness. I mean, for me, I was born, as I said, after the war, and I saw food coming into this country. I saw sweets coming. I saw chocolate being available. I saw bananas, the first bananas coming in ships that we'd never eaten in my lifetime before. And then I wondered through the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and I stopped wondering and gave up hope at how incredibly rich we were and how incredibly resentful we were about being so rich. And yet, you know, we need to start appreciating what we have. And when we do that, then we get closer to the end of the dark period, the end of the Kali Yuga type mentality. So if you're going to use the word figuratively, Kali Yuga, as a dark time of ignorance and negativity, when all the wrong attitudes and behavior patterns dominate and we can't get out of it, and us seeing a glimmer of light out of it, then 2025 might be such a time. But in terms of the grand cycles that the Eastern mystics talk about, I think it's a much longer term thing than that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for a great talk.
Well, Roy,
Okay.
we've kept you well over 2 hours now.
Well, I'm more than happy, but I'm so grateful for you to listen, and you know, and it's you know, it's always good to share ideas, and if it's been helpful or interesting, then I'm really pleased, and thank you.
Beautiful.
We think
beautiful.
Thank you, Roy. Really lovely talk.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you all over there in Tucson.
Oh, you too.
Yes,
Over
you
there
too.
in England?
Maybe you could end your screen share, Roy, and we could see more people, and they could all wave at you. And,
yeah, let's see if
whatnot.
wait a minute. Let me just get back there. Wait a minute. I'm going to stop my screen share. Oh, there we see you all. Hello. Yeah, it's weird. You know, it's the most weird thing, isn't it? Talking to people in thin air across the world. Hello, Katrina. Hello. You know, it's so wonderful, and it's amazing because you're just talking to thin air, but you're not. You're talking to real people, and it's really great. So,
I
good.
know.
Yeah. And what is
Yeah.
it now
Anyway.
over here? It's 11:30, so that's pretty good, isn't it?
The world's become very small.
Yeah.
Well, adios from sunny southern Arizona, where it's almost 100 degrees, and I'm going to the swimming pool.
Oh, wow.
It's pouring with rain
Making
and
us
10
jealous.
degrees outside and dark here. And in Scotland, if dawn's still there, it's even colder because it's cold up there, you know. Yeah, you guys are lucky in that respect.
Roy, thank
Arizona.
you.
Yeah, I was in Phoenix 2 years ago. That was really lovely, you know.
Thank you for all the years of study that you've done, and you just have such an incredible knowledge and such a gift for your communication skills and sharing it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Roy.
Okay, night, everybody.
No.
Yes, good night, all you people in the Europe and Great Britain. Thanks for joining us.
Belgium.
And
Bye, Bridget.
check
Bye,
out
everybody.
Thank
there's
you.
lots of thank yous in the chat, Roy. You can see all the people thanking you.
Yeah,
We
I'll
really
sit here and
appreciate
read it if I wait for a little while. I won't be because I haven't had a chance to look yet. Let's have a look. As well as thank you. I'm sorry I didn't do very well on the cryptocurrency, but I will read the book and I'll be wiser on it soon, I hope. Yeah, great, lovely, thank you. Thanks very much, everybody, for your comments. Yeah, that's lovely. Bye then.
Okay. Bye, Roy. Thank you so much. Okay, thanks for everybody for joining us today. Forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, Gail.